And with the ongoing economic debt crisis and the external factors affecting the world economy, will ASEAN be able to withstand that? Now, this will be the question that is in every investor's mind right now. But Susian Lim from the ASEAN Economist of HSBC has the answer.
Do you see a significant difference from the demand about 10 years ago, maybe in the region?
Yes, I would say, 10, 20 years ago, the growth model out here was, grow via exports. And I think one of the biggest lessons that we've all learned from the Lehman crisis of 2008 is that it is not a good thing to be purely export driven. You have to give some scope in terms of government policy into encouraging greater consumption growth, greater investment growth.
So how would you advise Asian economies to buffer themselves up for the impact that might come from further slowdown in the Eurozone as well as a slowing export sector in China?
I think I'm not well placed to give advice, and I think what policy makers have done so far has, by and large, I would consider as a very good job. We have seen central banks come in to provide additional monetary policy easing. Of course, that is constrained to a degree by the fact that interest rates are already so low, so there's only so much central banks can cut. But I think the government has picked up a significant amount of slack as well. We have seen a lot of fiscal stimulus being rolled out in the region, and this is productive spending. By and large, it's productive spending. It is going into long-term infrastructure projects. For example, ports and highways and roads.
Yes.
That will be productive, and add to GDP for years to come.
I see.
Yeah.
So, what about the GDP? Is it going to be affected much by the global slowdown?
Yes, I think at the end of the day, a slowing scenario is inevitable. But I think the main question is how deep is the slowdown going to be. Now, if you look across the region, probably with the exception of Singapore, within ASEAN, hardly anyone is talking about recession. So we are more looking at a scenario of moderation rather than a sharp slowdown in growth. The headwinds, as I said, come primarily from external conditions, and those are beyond the control of policymakers.
I see. And actually, there's a bit of a threat or a risk that Thailand might face a slowdown in the GDP due to the shocks from exports to the Eurozone as well as China. Do you think ASEAN right now is interdependent enough from the shocks of the Eurozone?
I think it's quite clear that the ASEAN interlinkages have increased in the last few years. But no, I don't think we are currently at the stage where exports to ASEAN are strong enough to offset, let's say, a contraction in demand from Europe and a contraction in demand from China. Sorry. But the fact that there's been increased ASEAN integration does provide some buffer against the slowdown in Europe and against the slowdown in China.
The ASEAN economic community integrating within 2015, and like you said, that the sovereign debt crisis in Europe might take some time. Do you see any obstacles that is born from this continued sustained crisis?
At the moment, I think the integration efforts, as far as I understand, they don't seem to have taken a hit yet from what's happening in Europe. And in fact, I would say the faster we get to to the penultimate goal of ASEAN 2015, which is free flow of capital and labor, the faster we get to that level of integration, the stronger the region can be, because then investment flows can improve. Human capital will be allowed to cross borders very easily, and I think as a region, output levels can be lifted.
And do you think the credibility for investment as a whole, the region will be lifted as well too?
Yes, but I think probably on that front there's still some work to be done, because if you look within ASEAN, I think the policy stance on investment, on foreign investment in particular, there are still some differences. If you look country to country, there are still some differences. And for these barriers to come down, it will take some time.
Yes, you're right. So what about just foreign direct investment into each ASEAN country? Which countries are the most lucrative in the second half of this year towards 2013?
That's an interesting question, and I think right now the outlook in terms of the FDI flows into ASEAN is a little bit clouded simply by the fact that the world as a whole is slowing down.
Yes.
Businesses are seeing thinning profit margins, slower growth. So FDI, having a large correlation with the growth of major investment, major investor countries. I think by and large, we are probably looking at slower FDI flows into ASEAN this year as a whole. But of course, within that there is some differentiation. Foreign investors will tend to lean towards countries that offer friendly terms with regards to policy, how open it is, are there incentives, are costs low, is it easy to do business there, and another important consideration is the significance of the market. A company ABC in the US will be thinking, if I set up a manufacturing plant there, does this country have significant long-term prospects that are attractive enough for me to stay there for the next 20 years? So within ASEAN, I think those prospects differ.
So Ms. Su Sin Lim, well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.